In ancient Aztec City, Texas, 1891, buried beneath the soil of El Paso, a treasure vault is found, which is supposed to contain vast stores of gold and manuscripts of the extinct race that once inhabited Mexico. Mundy's edition is the site of a castle built of white marble, which was the abode of priests. In El Paso, built above the ruins of a buried city. Now, if you've been following me along, we've covered many of the largest cities in every state, and we've shown this from Alaska, Seattle, Tacoma, Portland, Salem, my capital, many of the cities in California, all the way through Arizona, New Mexico, that all of the major cities are literally built on top of the ruins of a previous race. And we're not talking just little adobe mud brick buildings. We're talking some incredible, gigantic buildings. Again, the largest ancient buildings ever found were found in the American Southwest. 1,200 rooms, some of these buildings. Walls that were 20 miles long. And we're going to get into Great Walls here as well. These giant walls covered every city all across the United States. And as I've hypothesized and stated many times, they may have been for warring tribes, but I believe they were for keeping out giant animals. If you remember back to my New Mexico episode, and for those who are new, you should go back and watch the clip. Emperor Tigrinus, the king of the Aztecs, the Atlantean, living in a time frame where there were no war with other men. They were warring with giant animals. Emperor Tigrinus was what they called the first Tesian race in the world. The oldest redheaded mummies ever found. The turkey was mummified with him. It was their sacred bird. It was the phoenix rising from the ashes. He was buried with 2 stone battle axes. And in his tomb, there were paintings of him fighting giant saber-toothed tigers, giant mammoths. And what's really important about this is that this settlement destroys the narrative that people get hooked on. And it shows that Emperor Tigrinus was living with 2, if not 3 other phenotypes or races or whatever you want to describe them as. And that they had 2 or 3 different types of burial, meaning you had 2 or 3 different types of religious type ceremony existing together. Some buried their dead in jars and burned them into ashes. Others were mummified. So I believe this was kind of a after some kind of cataclysm, the remnants came together, and he was treated like a king. He was over 1.5 feet taller than the other people of his tribe. He was tall, redheaded, and the other people in his tribe were, some had woolly hair, some had long, straight hair, some had high cheekbones, but they were anywhere from 4.5 to 5.5 feet tall. And remember, he was approaching 7 feet. So quite important to remember. And yes, so back to the article. All cities lie on buried cities. So this is important. They're like, is El Paso built above the ruins of a buried city? Of course it is. San Antonio, Dallas, Houston are built on top of ancient cities. That eminent scientist asserts with positive assurance that where the present flourishing and modern metropolis of the Southwest, El Paso, now stands, was centuries ago the site of a magnificent city of castles and palaces whose walls were of solid masonry and polished marble. Before Cortez set foot on the soil of Mexico, before the Emperor Montezuma was tortured by the cruel Spaniards into disclosing the hiding place of his gold, and before the unhappy Aztec was driven to the mountains by his merciless conquerors, and his beautiful palaces and mines of fabulous richness confiscated, Dr. Burson claims that a beautiful Aztec castle stood at this point on the banks of the Rio Grande, and that it was buried beneath the present surface of the earth by a volcanic eruption of old Mount Franklin. Longo, good to see you. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you. Love you, man. So, yeah, like we've stated now, we've covered Greek cities found buried in mountains in Alaska. We found beaches 1,000 feet below surface level in Tacoma, Washington. If you remember my Washington video, they excavated 50 million cubic yards of earth to build Seattle. Seattle was completely buried in up to 100 feet of mud. The most obvious examples of some kind of event being erased, they couldn't even find bedrock to build buildings on. They had to excavate 50 million cubic yards of earth. And I have pictures all over from that episode, and I cover it pretty in depth. This is what was happening. Oregon, Salem, Southern Oregon, they find remnants of Chinese cities, Phoenician boats, Phoenician inscriptions. And it's the same all the way through Colorado, where they find a Phoenician boat buried 60 feet below ground, petrified. So, great way to start the episode. Kind of reinforcing again what we've been saying all along.